The completed 2010 gather schedule is on our national website, as well as the 2011 gather schedule. In your books are copies of a more extensive PowerPoint. I am going to show you the summary slides of the gathers for completed in 2010 and 11. All the individual slides I thought were somewhat redundant, so I'm not going to cover those. The summary slides I have tell it all. We'll start with 2010 completed gather summary. The total horses and burros gathered in 2010 were 11,295 horses, 485 burros. Those removed were horses 10,137, burros 476. Mares treated with PZP were 443 in 2010. Carla talked about some of the budget associated with those. So that's kind of a recap, as we always do, but since we didn't have a meeting towards the end of the fiscal year, I included that for you. Any questions on 2010?
I have one,
Yes, Renee.
just off the cuff. The 443 mares treated with PZP, what proportion of the population is that?
What proportion of the population? Well, if you got 35,000
Yeah.
horses on the range and half of them are approximately mares, 5,000 into 443 is about 1%,
Thank you.
if I've done my math correctly.
Thanks.
And Dean, what was the goal for the mares treated with PZP compared to the actual?
I don't think there was a
2010?
goal in 2010. I can't recall if there was or was not. These PZP mares were part of what we are calling AML gathers, where the gathers were, the goal of the gather was primarily to achieve AML, and where we could capture a few more mares to treat with PZP. So the goal was probably higher than that, maybe around 750. I don't recall exactly. It seems like we estimate more mares to be treated than are able to be captured and released to the range, and at the same time achieve appropriate management levels. I'm going to tell you about a different kind of strategy that we began to employ in 2011 when we go to the next slide. Okay, 2011 completed winter gathers. That's up and through February 28th. This slide was prepared before the antelope gather was completed, and those removal numbers are not reflected in this slide. About 1,400 horses were removed, not quite that many from antelope. So the total gathered in 2011 up through just a few days ago was 5,462, and of that amount, 3,941 were removed. Catch, treat, and release gathers, the third bullet on the left on the slide, shows that 1,634 horses were captured with a primary goal to treat with fertility control. I said primary because there were some removals that occurred there also. On the right-hand side of the slide, if you found the summary, and you can see it on the TV monitor here, the public up on the screen, the right-hand slide, the third bullet down, shows that there were about 560 animals removed, primarily the yearlings and the younger horses. So as a part of emphasizing fertility control in 2011, the concept was to identify herd management areas that were near or at appropriate management level, gather with a primary purpose for treating and releasing mares with fertility control. So in 2011 to date, mares treated with fertility control through the catch, treat, and release gathers is 469, and through those gathers that I earlier described as AML gathers, where the primary goal is removal, 134. So you see through this new kind of strategy to gather with the goal to treat mares, we've been able to treat a lot more. So the total there is about 603. And there were another 25 mares treated and released at the antelope gather. And the removed numbers again, you have to add about 1,400 to that. So that's about 5,300 total removed through February 28th. And there may be a couple of more gathers that occur in the summer that Carla referred to if BLM doesn't have to pay for them. I guess that's on my next slide. But I wanted to address, there's been questions here about whether or not summer gathers would occur or not. All gathers, as Carla said, have been put on the back burner and are not funded at our continuing resolution funding level. So what will not occur insofar as BLM herd management areas, if there is no additional funding, are the gather of about 18 HMAs, about 4,700 animals will not be removed. About 150 of those are burros. And in regards to 3 or 4 gathers that may occur, they are not on BLM lands. 3 are Forest Service gathers. Those would be conducted with Forest Service funding. And there is one small burro gather that probably will occur that's on a military base. It's actually a space shuttle landing strip, and burros on the landing strip don't mix too well with that. So about 60 there. The NASA indicates they'll pay for the removal cost, the preparation of those burros, and 90 days of feed. I think they're probably burros that have wandered off of BLM lands onto the military base. May I answer questions? I think that concludes my presentation.
A couple of the slides we don't have in our books, so it may be something that we'd like to catch up on, for example, the one that's up here and the previous one.
Okay, well, I'll have to take
So-
responsibility for that. I was helping Ramona out, and I am not the best operator of the copy machine.
That's okay. I mean, it's just
Where
as
would
long
we
as,
stuff the books we
we've
left
got
in
most
there?
of it, but those didn't make it.
All the slides,
can get
no
those sent
slides
to
have
you.
been revised, but you're indicating some of these summary slides?
This
Right.
this one and the previous
one
one
before.
was not in our books.
So,
Oh,
Could
okay,
you-
I added these. They were
Okay.
not developed. That's why you don't
Okay.
have them. Thank you, and I can email you those slides.
Okay.
And Anna, would you please
Renee?
make a note of that?
could you back up one slide, please?
Yes.
Thank you. If you just stay there for a second.
Dean, in
Yes.
regards to this, these are canceled AML or management gathers,
Yes.
these summer gathers that are on the screen now.
Yes, primarily AML gathers because it's not the best window to treat with fertility control, but there were about 200 PZP treatments that would have happened or could happen if we do these gathers. But they're
Okay,
primarily achieve AML. Most of the animals captured would be removed.
will there be horses then gathered for the catch, treat, and release program?
Not from July through September 30th.
With the primary purpose of catch, treat, and release?
Will not be any of those. No gathers from now until the end of the fiscal year, September 30th, will be conducted unless we have some additional funding. I'm not sure what we do in the event of an emergency gather, but we'll have to cross that bridge when we get there if animals are at risk of perishing without water or forage conditions become dire. Or there's a wildfire. There's another example of something that may occur. We've had HMAs that have almost entirely been burned out with no available forage, like Sailor Creek in Idaho last year. Pretty near the whole HMA burned, and all except 2 horses were captured. They're being housed in corrals. Some will be returned to the range.
How soon will that happen?
They have developed an environmental assessment that's out for public comment. The decision is due soon as to how many go back, how many get available for
I
adoption.
know all the livestock permits on that fire were all canceled, they're gathering cattle right now. So those horses probably will get held for an extended period of time, I would think, until that's resolved.
They may, and I haven't read the draft or the environmental assessment that's out, but the timing of the return, I'm unsure. It'll depend on range conditions and whether some of the areas that were not burned might be able to be separated and fenced off and made available. But my understanding is the whole HMA burned, and they'll have to do the responsible thing from the land, for the land, and at the same time hold some horses to turn back there in accordance with the AML.
Janet?
Dean, what are the numbers of horses or burros that were injured or killed during the 2010 or 2011 gathers?
Okay, the 2011, I think I saw some statistics that somebody ran, and they were about 0.3% mortality, not injuries. I don't have a record of injuries. 2010, it was less than 1%. I don't know the exact figure. Perhaps 0.8%. Mortality.
Okay. One point should be made that BLM does keep track of that. Is that correct?
Yes, in our
Okay,
gather
and then
reports.
secondly, we didn't mean to put you on the spot. Where can we find the exact statistical information that BLM does keep at the completion of a fiscal year?
During the gather, there has been, in the effort to be more transparent and present information to the public, during gathers we have had a daily update on the gather that includes numbers captured, mortality, any specific incidents that occurred. Those are on local district office websites, and at the conclusion of the gathers, we have a gather report that documents that also. But you can find it and watch it on a daily basis if you're monitoring the gather.
And at the end of each fiscal year, there is statistical information put together, which is what you said, 0.3% approximately for 2011 and 2010, less than 1%. There is a place to go back to see, to find out, but we don't, like I said, we don't mean to put you on the spot.
I think Lily compiled that stuff. It's
Okay.
not a habit that we've been in, but with the interest, we could combine all those and compile it in an annual report. If that's of
Yeah.
interest to the
Yes.
board, Anna could make another note for us, please.
Dean, would a court mandated gather be the same as an emergency gather?
Court mandated
Or court
gather
ordered.
would be do it, or you're in contempt of court. It's different than an emergency gather in my mind, because emergency means that by definition or policy, that the animals are imperiled and at risk of not being able to survive without a gather to reduce, because of limited forage or limited water, too many animals for either one of those resources. That's what we define as an emergency gather. A court mandated gather is a different kind of thing in my mind.
I guess my reference would be as far as funding goes.
Well, if the judge says you're in contempt of court if you do not conduct this gather, I would think that the Burro would be obligated to find the money. I'm not sure how the court would look at it if money's not available.
Well, that was going to be one of my questions. We understand the issue about the emergency gathers, that may be, need to be looked at further if we don't have the budget. But with regard to the court decrees, has the legal team at least started to look at that possibility?
Well, I think we're certainly aware that that could happen. If there were a court case, of course, we'd present our side of the story and the court would make their decision,
Thank you.
and we'd have to deal with the result.
Any other questions? So this may not be, where is the best place to ask about the catch, treat, and release? Fairly new program or new,
Right now.
okay. We're collecting the information, BLM's collecting the information as with regard to the numbers of the mares being treated. What is the protocol for following through on its efficacy? And is there a goal at some point to estimate that because X number of mares were gathered, there were X number of foals not born? Because we've all said along the line that, or acknowledged that fertility control does not get you to AML, but it will maintain, will help, it's one of the tools to maintain AML. So where is the follow-through? Okay, the first step is, treating the mares, and you've got that some statistical information. Where in the, hopefully there is a protocol that's going to track both the efficacy and maybe even project that by treating X number of animals, then you're going to maintain the animals at a percentage or however the folks want to.
Well, I think I have three answers to your question. Part of the efficacy studies are nearly finished that U.S. Geological Survey has been conducting in regards to the individual animal-based studies that USGS was conducting that we have reported to you about over the last 4 or 5 years. They were following the Little Book Cliffs herd, the Pryor herd, and the McCullough Peaks herd. They are still following a few mares that were treated to determine when they foal again. So that's one level of monitoring that was occurring and is continuing and almost completed through a research project. We have 2 research studies with the Humane Society of the United States in the Sandwash herd and the Cedar Mountain herd in Utah, Sandwash in Colorado, and they are following individual animals that were treated with 2-year PZP, what we call PZP 22. They are following those mares, and as well, they are following up to retreat those mares with an experimental shoot the mare with a dart, PZP 22, and I think they are also treating in that study some mares with liquid PZP, 1-year liquid agent with dart guns. There's been some success of that in Cedar Mountain. The report I last heard is that, no, I misspoke. They were able to treat probably 60–70% of the target mares in Sandwash, where the horses are more approachable and gentle. I do not have a report of today, but I heard about 3 weeks ago that they had been unable to dart any of the mares in the field at Cedar Mountain. Al, do you have any later information? Is that the latest that we've heard about that project?
That's my understanding, yeah. There was 80% redarted in Sandwash and none to date in the Cedars.
Okay, so I better get back to your question, and that was, what are we doing to track efficacy? So Humane Society studies are tracking that on a research basis, and then on a more general basis, a herd management area complex in the Red Desert in Wyoming is being tracked through annual aerial census. As you know, it's challenging to count horses on the range, and especially to the degree of accuracy to measure the effects of fertility control. So that's kind of the third answer I have. We're monitoring a set of HMAs in Wyoming, and then maybe a fourth part of the answer is we do periodic census every 2 to 3 years, and if it's in an area where mares were treated, if we have census findings or population survey findings that indicate that we don't need to gather as you would have expected without fertility control, you might be able to draw some general conclusions. But all in all, we recognize that we need to do more monitoring, and Dr. Kane is going to report on a couple of more studies regarding fertility control in the research update.
Okay. I thank you for the answers. Outside of those, and I guess what I was zeroing in was on our 2011 gather schedule, the items, the column that's marked in blue, that
Those-
do not include the ones that that you just mentioned. Where's the follow-up going to be with that? And then I think I just heard you say, well, you know, there's a census every couple years. Is that the follow-up for example, and I'm just picking one out of the blue, Idaho hard trigger, 37 mares were treated in November 16th. So for those 37 mares, the follow-up is 2 years down the line?
Well, the follow-up, as you know, mares treated in 2011 are going to foal in 2012.
Right.
And the effects of the fertility control should be noticed in 2013 and 14. So it would be appropriate, and I think that's what you're suggesting, to look at several of these herd management areas and do more intensive monitoring.
Right.
We're not going to be out there following individual animals.
Correct.
We're going to be out there with aerial surveys, counting adults and counting number of foals. But the ultimate measure is whether the gather cycle has been extended or not through, hopefully, the effectiveness of the fertility control on the mares.
I just wanted to make sure that the ones that, you know, have been treated, that fall outside the research projects and, you know, the Red Desert and the ones that are going on in Utah and Colorado, that we pay attention to those too, because that's going to contribute to the overall.
Well, there may be some of these that are in blue. This is posted on the website for the public. The blue are the CTR gathers that I talked about. I think we would select several of the best candidates for monitoring where we feel that we can get good estimates of the population. Some areas are very difficult to count, and we need to be prudent with our dollars and get the most bang for the buck, so to speak. So that's what I'd foresee in the future.
Okay. Renee?
The format that you've presented this in this year, these tables with the blue and the PCP mares on it, is a different format than we have had for the last few years. In the last few years, we've kind of refined the information that Lily was providing regarding the gathers so that we also knew what AML was for that herd area, so that we could, at that point, we could see how we were doing in terms of making progress towards achieving AML. And with the addition of the PCP mares, we would be able to look at the percent of that particular herd that was now being treated, and were there enough mares being treated that we had a hope of maintaining AML if we were at AML.
Okay, so I think there's another, is my mic on? Test. I think there's another note for Anna to make. What Renee is pointing out is that she would like to see the AMLs added back and the estimated post-gather number
Yes,
added back. And we'll have to present this in landscape.
absolutely.
I think Lily left those off because they didn't fit on one page, but
We've had that conversation before, and she's always challenged with, well, on a spreadsheet, you can only get so many lines on the page without whatever. But it's worth asking again to have it.
so we
have
will
them be added
reformat
back
it,
in.
do it in a different way, and we have that note. Thank you, Renee.
Dean, I have a question on the darting that you guys are doing. The darting, is it being administered from the ground or from helicopters?
All from the ground.
Off the ground, so a really low stress situation for the.
Absolutely. Years and years ago, I was involved in dart capture of horses that needed to be removed from an area that didn't have water, and it's a very dangerous practice, not good. All of the darting is occurring from the ground. We have one other ongoing, about to start in the McCullough Peaks, Wyoming herd management area, where some volunteers and BLM people will be out darting with the one-year PZP agent. So that's another fertility control effort going on, even though we're not funded to do some gathers. So it's all from the ground, yes. Both the one-year liquid and the experiment HSUS is doing with the 2-year PZP 22 from dart guns.
Thank you.
Any other questions regarding the gather report? Thank you, Dean, for that.
Okay, I need to log,
But you're not done yet.
no, I need to log back
Just
in.
need to change slides. And for board members, the next item in our book is the facility report.
Okay, you have in your, is my mic on? Thank you. You have in your book the full report. It's also posted on the web that shows capacity and numbers for all of the short-term and long-term holding facilities. My slides summarize that more extensive insert in the book. Short-term holding capacity is about 16,850 animals. Currently, as of February 22nd, there were 13,000, approximately 250 horses in holding, so about 3,600 space not used. I guess I forgot to mention there's 700 burros, so about 3,000 head of space not used with almost 14,000 animals in short-term holding. At long-term holding, there's 27,570 current capacity. There's some new capacity that we contracted for about 6 months ago, an additional 2,100 head. That part of it is available now, and part of it is still undergoing environmental assessment process, actually consultation with Fish and Wildlife Service. And it's about to be, those environmental assessments will be finalized come April 15th. Currently at long-term holding, looks like I did not put the right number in here. Yeah, I did. But I put the wrong number in for capacity. There's about 31,000 head capacity at long-term holding, and there are 27,570 animals at long-term holding. So you're always interested in ages of animals at short-term and long-term. On the slide in the upper left for the public, horses, there's about 9,000 that are weanlings to 4 years old. There's 23,000 that are 5 to 10 years old, and just over 700 that are 11 years and older. And then there's about 1,500 animals that just came in off the gather that have not been aged and marked. Burros, you see a summary on the right. The few burros that are in the system, there's about 300, 0 to 4 years old, about 200, 5 to 10 years old, and just a few that are older than 11. At long-term holding, there's just a few animals there younger than 4 that are there, 134 of them. Those are animals that were not trainable, and some that were deformed but still able to function in life. 5 to 10 years old, there's about 12,000, and then the majority of the animals are 11 years and older, and I see I messed up the slide again. Too much late night kind of business. But 11 and older, there's over 15,000 at long-term holding. So that is my slides. May I answer questions for you?
Questions from the board?
Since we're in Arizona, this almost 700 burros that we have are all in short-term holding. Is that just because those are never taken to long-term holding, or that you're usually capable of getting most of those adopted?
There are no burros at long-term holding. There's a couple of mules, so we have some of the genetics there. But no burros ever go to long-term holding. They, as you know, are more readily adoptable just because there have been so many fewer available for adoption, recently at least. And also, I think they're less costly for people to maintain, and people like to see them for guard animals and pets. And
So you don't have very many of those that will linger in short-term holding over an extended period of
No.
time?
no.
Okay.
Although I don't think the adoption market has been very active for burros or horses. But adoption season's coming, and we'll have good opportunity to place those burros.
Dean, of the long-term holding facilities listed here, can you identify the most recent ones, please?
Okay, not on a slide, but in the insert in your book, the most recent one is Foster, Oklahoma. That's part of the additional 2,100 head capacity I talked about. The rest of the 2,100 are not on this list. Previous to that, the Mount Air, Ohio one with 400 head capacity is about a year and a half old. The Mission Ridge, South Dakota is a newer one, but it actually replaced an existing one in South Dakota. And I think there's one other new one of about 2 years old in
The Gray Horse
Oklahoma.
one?
Gray Horse, is that the one?
I'm,
I'm not sure, Bob,
Okay.
to be honest with you. I do not know.
and then with regard to the ages of the horses, in short-term holding, the 8,700 and roughly 300, those are they're short terms, I mean, really short term, are they going to be moved through the adoption program?
As many as we can, and through Mustang Heritage Foundation programs as well.
And then you said the 134 that are in long-term holding are due to deformity or being determined not to be trainable?
Not to be very safe would
For
be
adoption.
probably the proper resistance to training, and not very safe.
Okay.
And not suitable for the adoption program. We do not expect to adopt all the 8,720 that are horses, age yearlings to 4 years old. As you know, our last 2 years' adoption numbers and sale numbers have totaled about 4,000 head per year, most of that being adoptions. So obviously, unless something changes dramatically, and there's nothing on the horizon that would indicate that, I mean, we are excited about partnerships in the Mustang Heritage proposal, but still, we have more horses than are adoptable.
And I had an additional question just regarding the especially short-term, with the budget issues and what have you. I know that there are some short-term facilities that have.
Can we silence the cell phones, please? Anybody else? If you could have your cell phones on silent, that would be great.
I thought I had it on silent, but it didn't work.
Thank you.
Thanks. With regard to the short-term holding, and with the budget restrictions and what have you, I know Palomino Valley, PDC is definitely got some employee shortages. I know they're down a wrangler position. That's one of the major places that the horses all come through. And I know that, as I said, there is a wrangler position that they're missing. And I understand it's currently stuck somewhere in the Denver contracting office. Is PVC, hopefully PVC is the only one that's in that predicament. But are there other short-term holding facilities that are experiencing the budget crunch that impacts the manpower? Especially since horses are coming in, you need people there to see what's going on when the horses come in. I mean, paperwork is important too, but when you've got live animals coming in, we need to make sure that there are people on the ground and there's manpower in place to take care of that. And I know PVC's been experiencing some issues with that because they've got, 1.5 person for the number of horses they have out there.
You're absolutely right. The care and feeding of the horses, short-term holding, is a priority. The budget issues that Carla talked about do not impair us from replacing those personnel. My manager at Palomino Valley is processing an emergency hire for a wrangler. We've discussed whether or not to bring in an acting for an assistant manager. Personnel are necessary, and they are on board to take adequate care Personnel have been working longer hours. I don't want the suggestion, or I don't want anyone to interpret just because there's a couple of vacancies at Palomino
Right.
Valley that the animals are not receiving their normal everyday care like they do in the past. The manager, John Neal, has been out working in the corrals. He's perfectly capable to do that, having come up through the ranks initially as a wrangler. And the emergency hire will help that. We're nearly done prepping the antelope horses that came in there, so there's really been no interruption of services. Also, I mean, that stimulates a thought that I have. Our new veterinarian contract for Palomino Valley and Indian Lakes provides, as it always has, for backup veterinarian support, but with more animals, we have been using at times up to 2 more vets to work with the horses. Not
Thank
work
you.
with the horses, but care for the horses insofar as veterinarian care and vaccinations and all the preparation work.
Thank you. Other questions from board members regarding the facility report? Then I think before we take our scheduled afternoon break, we have one more item on the list. And again, we'll give Dean an opportunity to change his slides. In our advisory board books, we have a whole segment on herd history, herd area history. Basically an explanation as to why 15.5 million federal land acres are not currently being managed for wild horses and burros.
Okay. This has been about an 8-year project. It has been a question near to the public's heart and even some members of the Congress. What happened to the 16 million acres of federal land that are not being managed for wild horses and burros? Here's a summary. I'm missing a slide here somehow. I want to talk a little bit about, we've published this data annually for the last, I don't know, however long it's been since we started posting data on the website. And there are differences in the numbers I have here compared to what has been on the website in the past. And people say, how could that be? How could these numbers change? Well, the HAs are the herd areas, the areas where horses were found in 1971, they're still there. And the herd management areas where we manage for horses and burros, they're still there too. What this project and what I have to present to you today, it was presented to you in draft at our last meeting, but this is our very best effort to compile all the herd area maps from the 10 western states that have horses and burros and the herd management areas where we manage them into one national electronic database. So how could these acres change? Well, some of the old acres were estimates from paper maps with big, thick pencil lines on them. Some of them were reported from electronic maps through recent land use planning efforts. And when you put all these maps together, all of a sudden you realize that this document here has lines that overlap these lines over here when they're adjacent across district boundaries or land use planning boundaries. So, when combined into one big database, the acreage changed, and some of the old hand count the dots are more accurately counted by GIS technology. The original herd management areas, according to this set of data, was 53.8 million acres. 42.4 million acres of that were public lands administered by BLM. Other ownerships, private and state and other landowners, of that 53.8 million, there were 11.4 million other ownerships. Currently, BLM manages 33.7 million acres of the original 53.8 million for horses and burros. Of that 33.7 million, 26.9 million acres are public lands, almost 7 million are private land. The unmanaged areas, the herd areas where we do not manage for horses and burros, compose about 20.1 million acres, of which 15.5 million on the chart up there, and that's what I'm going to talk about in these slides. What are the reasons we do not manage 15.5 million acres of public lands for horses and burros when they were originally found there in 1971? I've kind of grouped the reasons. Almost 50%, or 47.6%, according to the data, is not managed for 3 reasons associated with lands, a significant portion of herd areas that were not owned or controlled by BLM. The second reason, number 2, is that significant portion of the herd area, or water was not controlled or owned by BLM and not available within the herd area. And the third one was both reasons 1 and 2, land and water, not controlled by BLM. So of the 15.5 million, nearly half is not managed for horses and burros because there are other landowners or holders of water that preferred not to manage for wild horses and burros. All right, the second grouping here is another 2 million acres public land not managed, about 13.5%. A minor part of it, 1%, is due to land exchanges where BLM acreage was transferred to either private or state ownership. By far the largest portion here, almost 2 million acres, are lands that were through federal legislation transferred from BLM, Forest Service, and Park Service. A good portion of that was the legislation in California where BLM land went to the national park. Okay. Here's another 17%, 2.5 million acres not managed. Reason number 5 is critical habitat absent or not controlled, such as winter range not controlled. That's a small part of it, 0.6%. Resource conflicts, such as with T&E species, national conservation areas, wilderness, that's about 10%. Unsuitable habitat due to unproductive land, inadequate forage, about 5%. So there's another 17%, or 2.5 million of the 15.5 million we're not managing for. The last slide is a combination of reasons. No one reason is very significant. Reason number 6, horses won't stay in the herd area, multiple fences. Reason number 7, herd too small. Reason number 11, a court decision that said we would not manage for horses or burros. 12, urban expansion, such as Las Vegas sprawling out over the land and affecting areas. Habitat fragmented by fence, highway fences, a good example of that. Other reasons, number 15, the largest portion of this, is Department of Defense withdrawals. A good example of that is the shuttle landing strip that I talked about in California. So that's a summary of this. This data will be posted in about a month on our national website. Oh, I missed a category that was about 10% here. And these 2 reasons, these areas should never have been designated as herd management areas. The field reported that some herd management areas, all the horses and burros were claimed. If you recall that the Wild Horse and Burro Act provided for a claiming period for rightful owners to claim their lands. I guess the original mapping found horses, but they later came claimed, and therefore the wild horses and burros, therefore it should not be a herd area. And in upcoming land use planning efforts, those areas will be taken off the record. One area reported that there were no animals present at the passage of the act, and it was inaccurately designated a herd area. So I think I've covered all the reasons. I covered some of this in the beginning. It was a slide I couldn't remember where it was at. Don't expect these acreages to stay exactly the same. If there are errors found, then we will correct those. Future land use planning decisions may change the status, which would change the acres. So that's that. But I want to add to what will be posted and available for the public because it's very high interest. I've got 3 slides here. This one is a slide of a herd area of which all of it is managed for wild horses and burros. The herd management area overlays the herd area totally. This particular set of herd management areas in blue are area. The whole herd area is, I'm following it around on the slide with my pointer. That's the herd area. This area is currently being managed for wild horses and burros. This area here is not. The maps we'll post will list the reason through a number. I think the reason number 1 is what's on that map, and you see the private ownership that's in there, reasons why it was determined not to manage for horses and burros. The third kind of situation is this, and I'm sorry the slide isn't big enough, but these areas are herd areas, not managed, totally not managed for horses and burros. It looks like, again, we have a pretty good percentage of private land ownership there. So for transparency and disclosure to the public, these maps will be posted on the website along with a summary table of the acreage and the reasons they're not managed. So may I answer any questions that you might have about this? I think that's my last slide. Probably about ready for a break.
Yes, questions?
I'm
Wayne?
very glad to see that. Good job.
It's been a very long, arduous, difficult task.
And we should thank B too, because
Yeah.
she's.
But very much appreciated.
B. Wade and Mark O'Brien are the 2 principal people that compiled this.
But on the summary chart that you have in our books, if you look, it's Nevada, Wyoming, California, and Utah are the top 4 states that have been impacted in terms of numbers of acres.
That, of areas we do not manage.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, there's a summary chart in there nationally and then one by state.
Right.
Those tables will also be posted on the national website.
Thank you.